Mom, wife, pastor, teacher, sister, daughter, stepdaughter, daughter-in-law, sister-in-law, soon-to-be mother-in-law, niece, aunt, cousin, coach, boss, connect group leader, mentor, missionary, nonprofit organizer, counselor, committee member, committee chair, friend, neighbor, chauffeur, cook, grocery shopper, laundry doer, maid, coworker, professional colleague, team member, chaperone, and volunteer. These are just some of the roles that I have in my life. You see, we all have roles in our lives, and each of these roles, they ask and require something of us. It requires some of our time. So how do we find breathing room in our relationships? Just today, I had 7 different text message streams going on my phone, things going on. My oldest son was kind of stressing out about some of the details of his upcoming wedding here this November, and he was trying to problem solve, and I was trying to help him problem solve those. And then I was messaging my sister-in-law, Tessa, with some parenting strategies for her toddler. She's got my sweet little niece who's just 1.5, and she was asking me my advice and wisdom on some of the things that I did with my kids when they were that age. So I was messaging her. And then also I had this message group going with some of my coworkers. We were trying to figure out some kinks in a registration form that we're trying to launch. And so we're trying to handling those. And then I was getting messages from my dad who's on a trip in Botswana right now. And he's sending me pictures of his safari and whatnot. And so I'm trying to respond to those. More from a congregation member who was going through some health issues and just wanted to make sure that I knew. And another from a woman that I mentor who's a pastor of another congregation telling me about some of the things going on in her life. And then a friend in Iowa, we were kind of reconnecting over that. All of these relationships, I value. I value every single person that I texted today. I love them and they mean a lot to me. But let's be really honest. Sometimes it's a lot. It's a lot. And sometimes it keeps us from doing something that we're supposed to be doing. Like for me today, preparing this daily dose for you. You see, relationships are important, but often I think we don't set boundaries and prioritize some relationships over other relationships. It's really easy for me that if I don't prioritize my marriage, that if I'm not very careful, it doesn't get that much attention. You see, I have other roles. I have a congregation to serve, and Ryan has a busy career as an architect, and we have 4 kids, and both Ryan and I are the oldest siblings in our family, so we're often helping our younger siblings still with stuff. We're almost always running in different directions, this way or that. Both of us travel for work sometimes. And our relationship is easy. We get along on most everything. But if we haven't spent some intentional proximity or some intentional time together, we can tell because we start getting nitpicky. We start picking on each other, kind of grumpy or frustrated. And usually that frustration comes because we haven't invested in our relationship. And Ryan and I, we've learned this through our 20 years of marriage. We work really hard. We try to spend time every single day, and we're intentional about taking a weekly date night. And every month we take an overnight with just the 2 of us. And I'll be honest, it is really hard to find those times. It is really hard to squeeze those in. Sometimes they become lunches instead of an evening because we have hockey or mountain biking or something. And we learned early on in our marriage that we needed to do this. And I think that was maybe one of the benefits that happened for us because I had kids in the relationship before we met. So we learned that we had to take a break from them in order to focus on time for 2 of us. Friends, there are certain relationships in your life that deserve and are worthy of more time than others. It wasn't too long ago, I was leading a meeting here at church, and I've told my kids that if I'm leading a meeting, then if they call, I'm going to screen them, I'm going to cancel that. But if they really need something, to call back a second time, and then I'll answer it 100% of the time, hands down. And so I was leading this meeting and had this great group of people around me. And all of a sudden I saw that my son Chase called. And so I canceled it and I put it away. But then 5 seconds later, he calls right back. And so I looked at everyone in the meeting and I said, hey, I have this deal with my kids. I need to take this call. I'm really sorry. I know that I'm in charge of this meeting, but I'm going to step out in the hallway for just a second. I stepped out in the hallway and Chase called and he said, Mom, I just got this huge raise and I can't wait to tell anybody. And I shouted and we celebrated and he was like over the moon. And he said, oh, I'm sure you're in a meeting. And I said, yeah, Chase, I am. But it's okay because I love that I get to be the first person that you come and shout and celebrate that advice. I love that I'm in your top list that you have to want to keep calling. And then I went back into the meeting and I told everyone that my son had got a raise and they celebrated with me. You see, the reality is that Chase is more important to me than anyone in that meeting. It doesn't mean that they're less, but I have just 4 kids and they get to have me as their mom. And so that's an important relationship. So I prioritized it. But then what happened was interesting is that the people in my meeting, they thanked me. And they thanked me for being an example of parenting to all of them. One of them said, I didn't know that I could kind of do that if I needed to. And no one was upset that I took 5 minutes, even though I was kind of worried about that. And why do I do this? Because he's my son. Being his mom is more important than my role as a pastor or a committee chair or anything. It's not even a question. So which relationships in your life are the most important to you? And which relationships get the most time in your lives? And if there's a disconnect there, then maybe it's time to create some margin, to create some space, some breathing room in your life so that those can be more interconnected. If you say, my kids are the most important, but you barely see them, then maybe it's time to reimagine how that looks in your life. Or maybe you say, my partner is important, but so your volunteer role takes up all your time in the evenings. Maybe it's more important to reevaluate that. You see, the truth is that God values relationships more than anything. This is a really interesting part where Jesus, in the story, in the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew, Jesus looks at all these people and he says this weird thing that I think is hard for us to believe. He says, therefore, if you're offering your gift, if you're bringing your gift to the altar, and there you remember that a brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there at the altar and then go and be reconciled to them and then come and offer your gift. What I think is interesting about this piece is that Jesus tells us that reconciliation and restoration is more important to God than even your offering. And friends, I know that you have lots of roles. I get it because I do too, lots of roles. But the biggest role that you have in your life, please hear this to me, is beloved child of God. And if you're thinking about creating some more breathing room in your life, I want you to hear that role as beloved child of God, it means that you are so deeply worthy of it. You're worthy of having some space, some margin, some breathing room in your life.